Good morning, beloveds. It is a joy to be among you. I am the Reverend Edith A. Love, and it remains my honor and privilege to serve Unitarian Universalism as your minister. This is a complex subject. Where do I start? Where is the entry point? How do you talk to people about race? How do you simplify something so complicated? How do you speak of that which so many among us find almost unspeakable? I could dive into what is called white fragility. I could go into our polite distaste for naming and noticing someone's race. I could explain how race is a biological fiction, but something that is understood to be real by so many people that it has severe consequences in our modern world. It is such a pervasive, deeply embedded idea. I could go to how Carl Linnaeus first started categorizing people, and then Johann Blumenbach in the 1700s placed people into a hierarchy of race, with people with pale skin, blonde hair, and blue eyes at the top of this imaginary hierarchy, compared to other groups of people whom he saw as lesser. There are so many different directions we could take. Where do we start? Since I began preaching in 2011, I have always been known as a social justice preacher, wherever I have served this faith. At my ordination ceremony, Reverend Dr. Earl Fisher urged me to continue to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable, for at that time I was known for working with people who lacked housing. I want to begin from the very first to assure you that no matter your income level, your lineage, where you grew up, or anything else, you are a good person. None of us chose our parents. None of us chose our skin color. None of us are responsible for all of the things that happened before that we were born. Our theology, our covenant, the beliefs that tie us together in this sacred space, in the sanctuary and online as a community, tell us that every person has inherent worth and dignity. There is nothing to earn, nothing to work for. No accomplishments are required of anyone. You, as you are right now, sitting here, are worthy, are enough, are precious, and I know that you are a good person. You are, and you are, and you are, and you are. Every person, especially and including you. None of us created this thing called racism. It was carefully crafted long before any of us were born. We who are alive today didn't build systems of privilege and oppression. We inherited them. But those of us known as white have a duty to figure out what we can do about it. As you heard in the story we just shared today, is there really a human race? Are we racing towards something? What even is this thing? Can we talk about it? And I realize there might be some people right now who are feeling a little nervous with me just bringing it up. But we're doing this together. The 8th Principle Project states, we, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. I know that we in this country are usually not very comfortable discussing race. I know that it's complex to address and it might even feel a little scary. We all come together here to feel nourished spiritually, to feel intellectually fed, and maybe even have a cookie or two during coffee hour. and to be challenged morally and ethically by this faith that demands so much of us. So I'm asking you to please stay with me this morning. Stay with me in this. I urge you to consider, rather than seeking safe space, we're going to go into brave space together. Brave space is the place where we're going to talk about some real tough issues. We're going to look at the hard questions. We're going to hold each other's hands and take a look at things that we might have been avoiding for a very long time. It takes courage to look at this issue. And we might have been taught that even to name someone as belonging to a racial category is rude. If we say that we're colorblind to race, we're ignoring the very real impacts of power, privilege, and prejudice. We do notice. We do. We might not talk about it. But if you go to implicit.harvard.edu, you can take an implicit bias test for free and just check out how you feel on your own. Nobody has to know that you did it. This is for your own information. But we all have conscious or unconscious attitudes about this because it's baked into us from the moment we're born. It's the society that we live in. And I can't presume that everyone listening to my words is the same. Of course not. We're all so different. But I guess for many of us, this is probably a difficult conversation to have. Jay Smooth, in a video entitled How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love Discussing Race, compares talking about race and racism to letting someone know they have a little something stuck in their teeth. It's not personal. It just happens from time to time. It's part of our lives. We address it and we keep it moving. Those of us known as white are going to make mistakes. We might say something hurtful. I know that I have many times over. Hopefully, the goal is, as we learn, we do less harm. We make fewer mistakes, and we learn from them, and we keep trying. We can't stop. I remember Reverend Dr. Barbara A. Holmes, my professor in seminary, who'd said to me, "If you don't see my race, you don't see me." She said, really seeing her, meant understanding that she talked to her ancestors, that she was about as tall as I am, 5 feet of dynamite, and that she had a brilliant mind. She's a published author, and she was an attorney before she went to seminary. Or another way to begin this, I could talk about my own story. I was told all my life on my father's side that we were English, as well as part Cherokee and Chickasaw. We were so proud of this. And I was told that on my mother's side, we were German and Russian. Easy enough to understand, right? Well, when I was in my early 30s, I was in a college class, and the professor looked at me one day and he said, "You're Jewish." I said, "No, I'm not." He said, "Yes, you are." I said, "No, I'm not. Don't you think I would know?" And he said, "Go home and ask your mother." And I did. And she said, "Oh yeah, we just don't talk about it." It turns out I had a great-great-grandmother who only spoke Yiddish. I never met her. She died before I was born, but my mother remembered her. And I had a great-great-grandfather who also immigrated to this country in the late 1800s, who decided to convert to Episcopal and then Methodist, as the family story goes. And our family had been Methodist as long as I knew. So I didn't know this history. My mother's ancestors were German and Russian. They were German and Russian Jews. And on my father's side, being told that we were native all our lives, but not having any connection really to any tribe beyond just our extended family, I was very curious. So we did a DNA test. And I had a cousin who had done genealogy, so I knew that part of the history. I knew that I had an ancestor named Dragging Canoe. I had an ancestor named Bowles. I had an ancestor named Corn Tassel, for example. But the DNA test showed English, German, Scottish, and Bantu. Bantu? That's not a Native American tribe. Wait a minute. And then the wheels started to click, and I was like, oh, okay. And so these things that I had wondered about my whole life started to make sense. that never made sense before. It's fairly common, I'm told, that many people who are Southern, who thought of themselves as white, have ancestry that is more mixed than otherwise understood. Racial categories deliberately created by human beings are quite arbitrary because they're made up. They're not real, but we see them as real. And that's the rub, right? I strongly suspect, I can't prove it, my grandfather is long gone, but I strongly suspect that he was ashamed of this part of our heritage, and that's why it was never spoken of. And shame is a problem for us. We sit in shame as people who are known as white, and we don't have to. We shouldn't. There's nothing to be ashamed of. We inherited this stuff. It's not our fault, but it's our responsibility. So that's why I'm asking you today to consider what we might do differently than just sitting in these bad feelings. We don't have to feel bad. We don't. I think that's maybe why we don't talk about race, because we have these bad feelings we don't want to look at, right? And we even could consider ourselves not as a race. We consider people who are Asian or Native or African as having a race, but in the conventional understanding, we do too. We just don't talk about it. And so I think that we might have some stuff we could look at, gently holding each other's hands. And speaking of hands, in the book, My Grandmother's Hands, Racialized Trauma and the Pathway to Mending Our Hearts and Bodies, Resna Menachem explains how racial trauma is stored in our bodies, in our cells, in our nervous systems, and how we can begin to heal that trauma. Our nervous systems store the memories of what's been done to us and our ancestors. And that may sound nuts, but epigenetics has shown this. Epigenetics is where your DNA will carry things from generation to generation. And I could spend hours taking that apart from that angle. But what I want to bring you today is to consider what we might do differently in the future by looking at our past. Nathaniel Bacon was a wealthy man who wanted the colonial government to take a much harsher stance against the local Native American tribes in the 1600s. And so in 1676, he organized a militia of poor white indentured servants and enslaved people from Africa who captured the colonial city of Jamestown and burned it to cinders. This was 1676. According to author Michelle Alexander, the events in Jamestown were alarming to the planter elite, in other words, the people who held folks in bondage, and several more uprisings of a similar type followed as word spread far and wide. In an effort to protect their status and their economic position, the planters shifted their strategy for maintaining dominance. And so it was only after this, in 1681, in the colony of Virginia, that the first instance of white as a racial category was recorded into law. That is when the colony of Virginia forbade people who were Africans from marrying people who were white. 1681. Why is this important? I think it's important because we can see how whiteness was created as a concept to divide people who were only banding together out of common purpose, right? Because when people who are abusing, it was to divide poor people so they could no longer unite in a common cause against the wealthy who were exploiting them. And it's important because those few who are abusing their power are confronted by the many who are being systematically disadvantaged. That's when justice can start to happen. That's when oligarchs get very, very scared. And right now we have a presidential administration that is using race and racial issues as a wedge. Right now we have countless immigrants who are living in fear because our country has declared war on anyone lacking the proper documents to prove that they belong in America. ICE agents are not rolling up on sweet little Irish nannies and tossing them in the back of vans. They're rolling up on people who have brown skin and demanding to see their papers. They are denying them due process under the law. Right now, the nation we live in incarcerates nearly 2 million people, many times over more than any other nation in the world. And according to the Sentencing Project's website, 7 out of 10 people imprisoned are people of color, and I don't think this is an accident. Because it isn't because white people commit less crimes. It's because they get caught less often and they get easier sentences. Race and racism are at the heart of most of our justice issues. And that is why today, after the service, we're going to start the first in a series of film screenings and discussions on racial justice. Our aim is to set a foundational understanding of what race is and isn't, how it came to be, how it functions, and how it's embedded in every facet of modern society. And figure out what we can do to challenge bias within ourselves and in the larger world. The series examines the wealth gap, redlining, eugenics, segregation, Jim Crow, and so much more. We are very fortunate that the Reverend Latifah Griffin of the First Unitarian Universalist Congregation of the Palm Beaches has agreed to join in this film and discussion with us. I believe she will be here this afternoon. Because race is foundational to injustice and inequity, our Unitarian Universalist values call us to work to eradicate these systems and seek for a more just world, starting with ourselves and our own community. Isabel Wilkerson argues that race in this country is a caste system. In her book, Caste, The Origins of Our Discontent, she says this: "Our era calls for a public accounting of what this has cost us, a Truth and Reconciliation Commission so that every American can know the full history of our country, wrenching though it may be. The persistence of caste and race hostility and the defensiveness about anti-Black sentiment in particular make it literally unspeakable to many in the dominant caste. You cannot solve anything that you do not admit exists, which could be why some people might not want to talk about it." What can we do about this? I think we can begin by educating ourselves. It's just one step. Speaking out when we see that our neighbors are being oppressed, and agitating for positive change. I am proud of us for taking this step together. I love y'all so much. We're launching this educational series, and whether you can attend this afternoon or not, I hope that you will join us in doing this vital work to make our world a better place, just like in the book, for the whole human race. Amen, Ashe, and blessed be.